Number 1. First, I'll share my story, and then I'll start in on the theory. Story time. I've only recently been made aware of the theories circulating about our reality having been altered, but I think I might know when it happened. I remember it very clearly, because it was the moment everything changed for me. I was in my sophomore year of high school, and doing better, academically, than I'd ever bothered to do before. Prior to this school, I had grown up as the youngest of 6 siblings in a hick town where everyone's future was pretty much the same. Go to school, play football, never do well enough to get noticed, work at the paper mill, drink away your problems, and die. It was a pretty bleak existence, which is why in the summer of 2003, just before the start of my freshman year, when I had the option to move 2 countries away and live with my sister in order to attend a better school, like, oh wow, this place had computers better, I jumped at it. My sister, her husband, their 2 toddlers, and myself had all gone along swimmingly with each other, and I was a decently happy teen. But somewhere around mid-January 2015, everything changed. I remember walking into my study hall class, which, thanks to block scheduling, was more than an hour every other day, sitting down next to a buddy of mine, and then class change bell ringing. When I expressed my confusion, my buddy assured me that I'd spent all of study hall staring off into space and wouldn't respond to him at all. He said he'd started to get nervous that there might be something wrong with me, but guessed that I was just really caught up in some sort of daydream. 2 other classmates validated his story, and I spent the whole rest of my day deeply concerned as to how I could have lost so much time in the blink of an eye. Still to this day, I've never fainted or blacked out, so it was really disturbing. But it didn't end there. When my sister came home later that afternoon, I tried to tell her about it, but she snapped at me, saying something to the effect of how she didn't have the patience to put up with any stupid bullshit. Which is strange, as we'd always gotten along rather famously. Over the course of the next 3 weeks, every social truth I'd known would break. My sister and her husband divorced, I was kicked out of the house and forced to move in with my mother, and perhaps most disturbingly, my guidance counselor at school had no clue who I was. None. I remember thinking it was a joke, as she'd been the reason I was put into English honors, and at the beginning of January, we'd been discussing AP classes, the possibility of early graduation, and what I could do to avoid having to participate in gym. The previous winter, that same guidance counselor had pulled a bunch of us who'd been friends with Omar, who was shot and killed at a car wash in town, to see if we needed any help coping. So, this guidance counselor and I definitely had a history. But suddenly, there was nothing. It took me years, literally years, to get over that one. That left me estranged to my sister, academically ruined, my credits didn't transfer to the new district, and I was set back to my freshman year, which I was then forced to repeat because I officially started that year in February, and feeling alone in the universe. Now here's my theory. I think something happened in January of 2005. Not just to me, but to all of us, or at the very least most of us. The deeper I dig into this, and the more of these glitches and Mandela effect stories I read, the more often 2005 is mentioned. Perhaps most notably, it's the furthest back you can find reference to the Berenstein and Berenstein bears on any of the publisher's websites. But look out for it and you'll see what I mean. I think we might be dealing with some sort of global-scale quantum suicide, quantum immortality style event, with a trigger in mid-January 2005. Number 2. So, this story isn't that special, just something that happened to me a few years ago on the way to work. The job I had required me to leave my house around 5:30 a.m. I'd been working there for a year and was used to being up that early. When I got to the corner of my street, I looked to the left, into the backyard of another house's street. This house faced the other street and has no houses that block my line of sight. The yard was small, but right in the middle of it was a purple light. It was a filled-in rectangle shape, completely made of light that was about the size of a door. It was about as bright as a phone screen on maximum settings. It didn't fade in and out like a reflection. There was nothing behind it for the light to be projected onto. No source for it either that I could see. Nothing. Just a purple, glowing light floating in the middle of someone's yard. I sat there for nearly 10 minutes trying to figure out anything about it. As the sun came up and brightened the sky, the light remained unchanged. At this point, I was going to be late for work, so I just drove away. I still have no idea what it was. Number 3. Hey guys, I'm kinda new to Reddit, but something really bizarre happened to me, and it seems like this sub is really the perfect place to put it. When I found it, I immediately thought of this shit, and I've been fighting with myself about posting it. More on that later, I guess. First of all, I've been to therapists and psychiatrists for all my life, have always been mentally ill, and I hallucinate a lot. I've never once not been able to tell when I was hallucinating. I'm well acquainted with my own brain and its little bitch fits. And it's only ever like demons and shit. I honestly don't think whatever this freaky-ass string of events could be is me having some ridiculously long psychotic break, especially because I don't feel weird and everything else was normal at the time. Anyways, what happened was this. 2 or 3 years ago, one of my classmates got in a seriously fucking stupid car race on the way to school with 2 other people in his car. He crashed it into a telephone pole and was tragically killed, along with the other 2 boys in the car. I remember it really clearly. My grandma came over the next day with the newspaper and comforted me because, well, I was genuinely distraught. The boy who was driving I barely knew and had never seen before, but I distinctly remember the 2 others who were in my grade and in many of my classes. My dad and I talked about them. I talked with my friends on Facebook about it, some of them having been a lot closer to them than me. Checking back on those conversations afterward showed they were a lot more vague than what I remember, and none of us ever specified who died. Don't think I ever checked the newspaper, but I'll try to find an article online and tell you guys what it says later. The way we found out was really public. There was a huge announcement from the principal at the beginning of school over the loudspeaker where he told us the names of the deceased, and we had a moment of silence. People talked about it for weeks. And since I've gone out of my way to tell you about my hallucinations and how much of an impact this event had, I'm sure you already know what I'm about to say. But, actually living it? It's so different. It's fucking weird. So, yeah, one day, I woke up, went to school, and the 2 other boys were there. Totally alive. Pretty busted up, but the same popular little assholes they'd always been. I didn't even like these guys, and I almost got teary-eyed. The other boy was still gone. I even overheard them telling their story a bunch of times. I don't think either one of them even passed out. No injuries beyond broken bones. No way they could have been mistaken for dead. No way the principal would have announced they were dead, realized he was wrong, and not made an apology to correct it. I thought that I must have been the one who was wrong and just let it go. I don't know. That feels like the weirdest part. I never just let things go like that. I've been reading a lot of these threads in preparation for posting this, and the theme of I didn't want to look weird so I let it go always makes me cry bullshit and get annoyed, but now that I think about it, I don't know. Maybe it's a mechanism by the aliens to keep us from investigating. It's just, I've never felt genuinely embarrassed about talking about something weird like this. I'll recite a list of every diagnosed mental disorder I have to a complete stranger, but it literally took me years to build up the courage to even think about this maybe being a real experience. I'm still embarrassed. I didn't even want to specify what little I did, out of fear they'd find this and get pissed that I might be trying to get attention from something so terrible. But I swear, I'm not. Maybe it's just because a boy died. Maybe it's because there's a part of me that's afraid that pointing it out for the first time is going to get them hurt. Maybe it's because I'm having trouble admitting that my brain might be so messed up that it conjured up all this shit. I don't know. Writing this is making me terrified. I also decided to type it up at the worst possible time, 9 a.m., and for some reason it's foggy as shit outside, and it's never foggy here. No birds. There are always birds. Honestly, it's like Silent Hill, but hot. Don't know why it's scaring me so bad. I don't know. Glitches have happened to me a couple times, but it's only ever been real tiny shit. This was huge, and it feels like something is telling me not to post it. My hands are even shaking. I don't know. It's weird as hell. Number 4. I want to paint this picture as accurately as possible, just because I have absolutely no idea how it happened and need help brainstorming what happened. It's nothing too crazy, but it left me completely dumbfounded. I've been borrowing my dad's Jeep for this summer because we had to sell the car I had. This Jeep has keys where you can lock and unlock with buttons on the keys. Pretty standard, but I never had that before. So, because it's a new feature, I use it a lot. I live in a wonderful area, in a small town, so I never really have any reason to lock my car doors. But like I said, it was a new feature for me, so for the last couple days I've been locking and unlocking my car with the key buttons. I was just getting off work as a server, and I was approaching the car. In my right hands are the keys. 10 feet away from the car, I press the unlock button and unlock the doors. I open the door with my left hand, meanwhile, never letting go of the keys. Swear on my life that I didn't open my right hand even. I sit down, without doing anything else. I reach with my right hand, with the keys, to put into the ignition to start the car. I do it every day, and I'm sure everyone does the exact same. Except when I reached with my hand, the keys weren't in them. I was like, wait, what? I never even opened my hand. I don't have to look for long before I see the keys sitting right next to me in the passenger seat. Now, I don't really like to put things in the passenger seat in the car for 2 reasons. One, whenever I put anything there, it'll slide all over the place when I drive around, so I keep things in the center console instead. Second, I keep the car very clean because, like I said, it's my dad's, and I treat it well. I sat there for a solid 5 minutes trying to figure out how they got there, because I was positive they were in my hand. I know this isn't really anything huge or totally crazy, but I don't see any possible way it happened. The keys couldn't have been there before because I had to use them to unlock the car in the first place. It's very uncharacteristic of me to put anything on the seat, and I still maintain that I never let go of the keys. I was in a hurry to leave because, fuck being a server, and me sitting down and reaching for the ignition was a continuous single motion. I don't know how it happened, and it didn't really creep me out. It just left me dumbfounded. I found this sub from Ask Reddit today, and this happened about 3 days ago, and I figure it belongs here. What do you guys think happened? Because I have no clue. Number 5. This is quite an old event that happened to me, but I thought I'd share it here, since it fascinates me and really makes you think. It happened back when I was in middle school, but I still remember it like yesterday. I was at home, approaching bedtime, about 10 p.m. My mom was in my bedroom putting some of my clothing away, and my dad was in the opposite far corner of the house, in a chair reading a magazine. I said something to my mom like, "Where are you? Are you in my room?" She answered, "I'm over here," from my room, and so I started to walk over. I walked out of the kitchen and took 2 steps into the hallway leading to the bedrooms, when I heard an absolutely terrible crashing sound coming from our garage, and it was loud. The sound lasted about 3 seconds. I thought the garage just exploded. I've never to this day been so scared. I tried to scream, but ended up making a sound I didn't know I could make, like a coughing yell, because my throat tightened up so much. I just sprinted out of the hallway, back through the kitchen, to the living room where my dad was sitting, quietly reading. I tried to scream to my dad to say what I heard, but all that came out was that weird yelling coughing sound. He just looked at me like, "What the heck happened to you?" After about 30 seconds, though still shaking, I could finally talk again and said, "Something happened in the garage." He just looked at me puzzled. Again, I said, "Didn't you hear that? Something just crashed in our garage." He said, "What?" I didn't hear anything, but got up to take a look in the garage for me. I wasn't about to go in there. I didn't know what he'd find. I waited at the edge of the hallway, just barely peeking to where I could see in the garage, while calling to my mom to ask if she heard it too. My dad came back inside in 5 seconds and said, "Everything's fine. What did you say you heard?" My mom also said she didn't hear anything, even though my bedroom shares a wall with the garage. I asked my dad to look again, and my mom went to look around too. I even asked my dad to look in the attic, and finally, I poked my head into the garage too. Everything looked normal. I kept telling my parents what I heard, and they saw I was terrified, but they brushed off the event. "Maybe you just heard a rake or shovel slip off the hook or something." I know what I heard, and it was something big. It took me about an hour to calm down enough to even stop shaking, and another 2 to 3 hours to be able to go to bed. A month or so later, I'm asleep in my bed, a little after midnight. Suddenly, I'm jolted awake by a horrible, loud crashing sound. The same sound that I heard before walking in the hallway. In what felt like about 3 seconds, my mom ran into the room and turned on the light, and my dad came in right after. We all heard the sound this time. My mom's expression said it all. All around me, on my bed and on the floor, were pieces of insulation and chunks of plaster. I was miraculously untouched by anything. My bed had been pushed about 3 feet farther into my room, and up against it was the hood of our car. My dad ran to the garage and I got up and followed him there, once again shaking, though not as badly as the first time around. What we saw inside was an awful mess. Our car was completely crumpled in the rear and was pushed through the workbench, our bicycles, and the wall, and into my bedroom. Another car had crashed into our garage. I'm absolutely convinced that I heard the accident happen a month before it actually happened. Therefore, this means that the event already existed, already happened, when I heard it in my head the first time. And this kind of thing has to be all or nothing, where if one thing in the future already happened, that it implies that everything has already happened. We just haven't reached the condition in time to perceive it yet. I truly have no idea as to the mechanism by which this occurred. I just know that it did, and would love to understand how. Number 6. I'm not sure if this subreddit is where this story should belong, but I'm sorry if it isn't. I'd also like to preface this by saying I recognize that this could all very well be a strange coincidence, but it's still odd nonetheless. When I was 7, my grandmother died. Her name was Audrey. She was sometimes called Auntie. When I was 10, my brother's best friend died at the age of 26. He was close with our family, like a second son. My grandmother knew him too before she passed. When I was 13, 3 years after he died, my father and I went to visit his grave. My mom stayed home. We visited every so often. My grandmother wasn't buried in the same place as him. We kept her ashes at our home. So we park and I get out of the car. His gravestone isn't far from where we parked at all. Immediately after stepping out, I step on a small red and pink book that's in between the grass of the cemetery and the concrete where we parked. Kind of in a very weird place. It seemed like it was placed perfectly so I would find it. I pick it up. It's called God's Little Devotional Book for Moms. My dad and I thought it was cute and that we should bring it home to my mom. Nobody was around and we waited to see if someone would come by for it, but nobody did. We visit his grave for a while and head home. I bring my mom the book we found and she likes it. It's filled with daily mantras and sayings and stuff like that. Then I look on the first page of it and there's writing in pen on it. It says, "To Tammy, all my love, Auntie." I find this weird because Tammy is my mother's name and that's how she spells it too. We're a little perplexed by this for a few moments when my mom says that she recognizes that handwriting. It's my grandmother's. We go out and get several cards my grandmother had sent us and letters she'd written to check and see if they match. And yes, to a T, that is her handwriting. Also addressing herself Auntie, like how people always used to call her. My grandmother had been dead for 6 years at this point. I have no idea how it happened. Here are some pictures of the book. Number 7. This happened probably 9 years ago, making me 11. I was at a local laser tag arena and arcade with a friend's family. We frequented this location and it's never been known for bad cell phone signal or anything, so reaching someone was a breeze. I wasn't lucky enough to have a cell phone at the time, so I used my friend's dad's phone to call my mom at home. I found her name and number saved into the phone and called to ask if it would be okay to have a sleepover at the friend's house. She picked up and I said my usual, "Hi Mom, can I," speech, expecting a, "Sure, love you." But she said, "You must have the wrong number," and hung up. I check the number and it's indeed the correct number. I call again. Same response. Check again and call once more, and this time she picks up. I'm kind of panicked and ask her what's been happening when I call, and she seems confused and says I haven't called. I brush it off and ask my favor, to which she says yes. I check the outgoing calls, and there are 3 dialed calls to my home number. I was pretty shaken, but was young and didn't understand what may have been happening. It was her. It was her voice, and it was our number. I didn't know it at the time, but now I know that I glitched. And it scares me more than ever. Number 8. I lived in the Philippines until I was 8 years old, and as a child, I only had a few friends. It wasn't hard for me to leave them when I moved to another country because most of my friends were only classmates. We never hanged out after school because we all lived so far away from each other, so we never really got that close. Fast forward almost 10 years later, and I suddenly received tons of friend requests on Facebook from people who went to the same school as me in the Philippines. At first, I thought it was nice of them to remember me, especially since it's been so long. But after thinking about it, I found it quite strange that they all suddenly remembered me and found me on Facebook. Also, my name is very difficult to remember as I have a Vietnamese name, and people knew me by my nickname. I also know that, even then, my friends never really knew my full, real name, so I'm not sure how they found me. To get to the point, because of this happening, I started to think about my old friends, and I remembered this one girl that I was really good friends with. Before we met, I didn't even notice we went to the same class, but I guess that's due to us being 35 students in one class. She bumped into me while I was going to the bathroom, and since then, we started talking to each other. We used to hang out every break, and we ate our lunches together. After a while, we became best friends, and she invited me over to her place. I was so excited when she invited me because I've always wanted to hang out after school with friends, and luckily enough, she lived really close to the school. I remember me entering this old apartment complex and being really surprised about how poor she was. The school I attended was a private international school, and most of the students were rich and could afford it. I guess she was one of those students where her parents sacrificed all they had to let her attend a good school. Her parents were super nice, though. This particular memory stuck quite well with me because I remember her dad running out to buy a bottle of Coke since he was so happy I was there. I guess his daughter didn't have friends because, now that I think about it, I never saw her talking to anyone other than teachers. The next thing I remember was that I started doing homework with her and suddenly my dad came and knocked furiously at their door. I didn't have a phone at that time and I just went to her place without saying anything, and I'm pretty sure he was scared shitless because kidnappings were common, especially around my school area. I didn't have time to explain myself, and my dad just grabbed my stuff and carried me out while shouting at me. My friend suddenly stopped talking to me after that incident, and she pretty much started ignoring me, and, well, I could understand why. Suddenly, a year later after forgetting about her, I noticed she was never at school anymore. I questioned my teachers and my classmates. They all said they didn't know anything about her, and everyone just gave me funny looks. It was as if she was forgotten by everyone. During this time period, my family was going to move to Norway, so I wanted to say goodbye and sorry to her, so I kinda got obsessed with finding her. I visited her apartment once again, but a different family lived in it. and when I asked about her, they said they lived there for 20 years and had never met her. I even asked my dad about the incident, and he says he remembers being mad at me and that he carried me out somewhere, but other than that, couldn't remember anything. My mom remembers me talking about a person all the time when I was younger, but she couldn't really remember who. I couldn't really do much about it before we left, and I guess I myself forgot about her until recently. Yesterday, I went through all my yearbooks and pictures, but I couldn't find her anywhere. I don't even remember her name anymore. I also messaged my past classmates, and they don't know anything about her either. I'm really confused now because I still have a necklace made out of beads that she gave me, so I have proof she existed. The weird thing is, while I was thinking about her, I remembered a guy in my class who I had a crush on, and we talked a lot to each other, and I can't find him anywhere either, and wouldn't you guess? Nobody remembers him. My grandmother is a quack doctor, witch doctor, and she said when I was younger I cried a lot because I saw spirits, and she said they kept on annoying me and latched onto me so that she had to make me charms to ward the spirits off me. I talked with her, and her only explanation is that they were spirits who wanted to be my friends. I don't really believe in the supernatural. Sorry about my language. English isn't my first language, so I hope you understand. Number 9. Even though I was sick at the time, I'm considering this an everyday mode experience, because I have a direct experimental witness, and, to be honest, sick was pretty much my norm at the time. Also, this is long, because I wanted to express how clear and very real every interaction truly was to us. This is something that happened to me and my husband several years ago that still comes up sometimes as a, hey, remember how super weird and off-putting this experience was? Conversation. We've historically called it the ghost doctor incident, but after reading through this sub for a bit today, I think it's more glitchy than ghosty. This happened several years ago. Initial guess was wrong. It was closer to 8 to 9 years ago. So, 8 to 9 years ago, we needed to make appointments for each of us to see a doctor, as I had ignored some symptoms for a while. Turned out to be related to an allergy. Nothing neurological or psychological, since I've seen that theory tossed around and do believe it to be a plausible explanation for a fair amount of glitches. I wanted to make sure to mention that. And my husband has a chronic condition that requires daily medication and yearly blood panels. Also not neurological or psychological in nature. He still had a few months left on his medication, so I was to go first with the new doctor. I went online, found a nearby doctor that would take us on, and made an appointment over the phone. Boring, mundane adulting so far, right? The day of the appointment, we arrived at the slightly run-down-looking complex of offices. We were young, had little money, and this was the kind of doctor we could afford at the time. We were worried about finding the right door, but were able to quickly because it turned out to be well labeled. We sat in the waiting room for a while, talking to the very friendly Hispanic reception nurse here and there. She noticed that I was going over a list I'd made of the symptoms that had been concerning me, one of which was a small lump on the side of my neck that had gotten worse after a cold and was very troubling. There was something about the way that she told me not to be worried that helped me relax. She was just a super nice woman. The kind of warm, mommy vibe all of my favorite nurses had ever had. This is why I remember her so vividly. After a while, the super nice reception nurse led us back to the exam room. The exam room was, to be blunt, freaking weird. It was half storage space, half exam room, with a bookshelf full of cardboard file boxes next to the normal exam-y doctor stuff. The doctor came in, and he was a tallish, middle-aged African-American man with a short afro. He was nice enough, but rather impatient. I was somewhat annoyed, but chalked it up to being a first meeting, and I was being insistent about going over each symptom in detail. He told me what another doctor had about most of what I had going on. The allergy I have is difficult to diagnose in adults. And then we came to the neck lump. Scar tissue from chronic ear infections, he told me, palpating the area. Nothing to worry about, he told me. He prescribed me an antibiotic for another symptom and sent me on my way, asking me to make a follow-up appointment for after the pills were done to see if I needed additional tests and treatment. Now, I went into that much detail because I've talked to other doctors since then about the scar tissue and gotten the same answer. Also, for another reason I'll circle around to at the end. I filled the prescription, took the pills, and waited for my follow-up appointment. The day of my appointment, my husband and I arrive at the rundown grouping of offices as we had before. Go up to the door we remembered going to the first time, and there's no visible label and it's locked. Where the doors had been labeled looked like they hadn't been recently painted over or scratched off. The windows were all covered up. The place was entirely deserted. Weird, we thought, but decided to try walking around to the back of the building. Maybe the nurse was at lunch or that door wasn't open that day for whatever reason. We found the back door. Same thing. Door locked. No signs, no doctor's office. I tried calling, but there was no answer at the number I'd used to make the initial appointment. No voicemail, no disconnected message, just endless ringing and ringing. I couldn't find the internet listing I'd pulled up in my search that directed me to the office, couldn't find any evidence that there'd ever been a doctor there at all. As far as I can tell, there are a few explanations to the doctor's office that wasn't. They may have been some kind of really sketchy not docs that fled, but there were no news stories of anything like that in my area. Also, I'd been complaining of severe stomach and body pain, which ended up being related to my allergy, and most pill mill docs would have quickly handed over a pain pill prescription. This doctor, however, was cautious, and didn't want to treat the pain without knowing what was causing it. Very detailed residual haunting, but if that were the case, I'd have found some record of that doctor having existed at that address. Back then, when looking into this, I had his name handy. Matrix/reality/universe glitch. As I said, I know there are details I'm forgetting or want to confirm with my husband, so I'll post an update after I talk to him. Update. I asked my husband if he remembered the doctor who wasn't when he came home. Our roommate was in the room. He doesn't know the story, so I actually got to hear it the way he tells it. Perfect. He has no idea what this man's name was, though, as he was talking, the name smacked me over the head, so I'm going to sleuth tomorrow. I'm kind of in the let's find a normal explanation frame of mind now. Anyway, my husband corroborated my telling of it, but didn't mention whether or not he was examined or had blood work done. According to him, the office was obviously being renovated, and there was a daycare next door where there is now a well-established, long-running maid service chain's office. He was adamant about the office unit being entirely abandoned, and that it felt off. He also confirmed where it was, exactly. Fun fact, we moved to an apartment across the street without realizing it roughly 2 years after the experience. He remembered that, which jogged my memory. I'd purposely not thought about it because it was too weird, or maybe just stopped caring for a while. Anyways, now I have the general address, what I think is the doc's last name, and a desire to find an explanation. Update 2. So, just a couple of things. First, my husband did get examined, had blood work done, and received a month of his meds. He has no clear impressions from the exam, so it was routine. He did tell me he was able to look in a couple windows that day and that the place looked like it had been abandoned for a while, but that it looked like a deserted sales office on the inside with desks, chairs, and the like where a waiting room and play area had been. Lastly, I remembered the doc's name, and as soon as I said it, I got a "yes, exactly" from my husband. We looked up the name. Nothing resembling that doctor even a little bit. When work gets slow today, I've got a few things to research. Number 10. This is my first time on this subreddit. Found it via the random button up top. But reading through some posts, I think this story fits. It happened to a friend of mine, so I don't have all the details, but I know enough about it to feel comfortable sharing. I've known my friend, who we'll call Aaron, since preschool. We went to the same preschool, and our mothers became friends, so we were able to hang out a lot as children, despite not going to the same elementary school and living several miles apart. During preschool, he cut himself somewhat badly on a chunk of broken glass from a vase that got knocked over. That gave him a nice scar on his inner forearm that was around 4 inches long, half an inch wide. It was a pretty distinctive scar, even years after the fact. Kid Aaron goes to the hospital for stitches. Fast forward to 2013. He's 20, and driving home one night on a road he doesn't normally take home due to a road closure. He's going too fast, comes up to a sharp corner, and rolls his vehicle, which is a green, smallish SUV. I don't recall the exact make. The SUV crashes into a tree on the side of the road, completely caving in the roof over the front seat. He probably had less than half the space he originally had, nowhere near enough for him to fit in the front seat. Aaron simply pushes open the door to the SUV and climbs out, without so much as a scratch on him, not even a rip in his clothes. He fishes out his cell phone, which is likewise undamaged, and calls his grandmother for help. He gets checked out by paramedics that arrive, and gets the all clear. He's telling me this about a week or so later when I come to visit. I live 2 hours away from him now. I notice that he doesn't have the scar on his arm